And welcome once again to another edition of Footnotes. Pastor Mark here with Pastor Brandon, Pastor Brady, and Timothy, who's sitting in the back of the room today. Timothy wants you to know that this episode is sponsored by fun sound effects that you're going to hear throughout the podcast. So buckle up and hang on. But our topic today is really exciting. Brandon, tell them what the topic is.
Debt.
Debt, yes, which is actually spelled debt.
Yeah.
It's got a B in there. Debit. So our topic today is debit. And we're excited to talk about debit. And is it right? Is it wrong? What's the biblical stance and what are we going to do about it? So in the life of Broadway, if you're a member or you've attended, you know that one of the exciting things we've been doing for the last 3 years is we have had a debt reduction campaign. We've been trying to reduce all debt that the church owed on the building.
Praise the Lord.
Yes, and we are now under $1 million, and I don't want to date us because who knows, the Lord is just blessing and people are giving. And we are reducing that debt daily, monthly, and it changes pretty rapidly at this point.
Yes.
So we're excited to be, at some point in the very near future, debt-free. But what we want to do on today's show is talk about that. Number one, to just remind and encourage you, keep giving, keep being faithful to the Lord. But we want to talk about what debt-free would mean and what it would look like. So here's the 3 questions that's going to frame our discussion. Number one, let's start here. Is all debt wrong? Now, that is a very good question because if we say all debt is wrong all of the time, then that's going to create some very honest questions from our people and from our own lives. Number 2, we want to say, is debt wrong for our church? Is it wrong to be in debt ever as a church? And number 3, what can debt-free accomplish? So those are the 3 questions that are going to frame our discussion. Is debt wrong? Is it wrong for the church to be in debt? And then if the church is debt-free, what would that accomplish? So let's start there, guys, and let's have our first sound effect ready. That was Timothy, everybody. And Timothy, what was that? We don't know, but that was one of Timothy's brand new sound effects that he has incorporated into Footnotes. Folks, this is what we're paying this guy for. Good job, Timothy. All right, so now that sound effect is out of the way, and you can write in and guess what it is, and if you write in and guess correctly, we will let you take on the debt of the church and pay it off. So please,
congratulations.
Please participate in that very fun listener-awarded contest. All right, so guys, is all debt wrong? Let's start there. Brady, what do you think?
No.
In your orange shirt today.
Yes, orange shirt.
Yes.
No, I mean, things like, I guess the question I would ask is, why are you in debt? Is it for a purpose like, a mortgage on a house? You're working towards owning a house. I mean, most people are going to have to take out some kind of loan to start to own a house. And so I don't think that's necessarily wrong. So if you have a goal or maybe potentially student loans, within reason, and you're going to pay them off and you just don't have the money right now to go to college, I mean, something like that could be where you have a purpose, you have a plan. You're not just going to let that debt accumulate for years and not work towards paying it off. I think there's situations like that where debt is not necessarily sinful in those scenarios.
Now, Brady, the Bible has verses about debt. So how would you explain that based on what you just said? Because Brandon looked up before the show began, Proverbs 22:7, that says the borrower is the slave to the lender. Psalm 37:21, the wicked borrows and does not repay, but the righteous is gracious and gives. So we looked up some verses. The Bible sincerely, definitely addresses debt, right?
Yeah.
And we have Dave Ramsey on the phone to talk to you as well today.
Dave, where you at, Dave?
Dave, Brady would like to talk with you. Please tell him
all debt is bad.
All debt is bad. And you know how Dave Ramsey is. He calls everybody stupid on the podcast. Well, that's just stupid. Yeah. So I guess he'll but in all sincerity, there are Bible verses that talk about debt. And by the way, I agree with what you
Yeah.
said. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just being funny.
I also
but
agree.
yeah, we all agree. What Brady said is logical and true. But there's these Bible verses that are out there, and then there's people like Dave Ramsey that we would agree with fundamentally who would say don't go in debt. So kind of why I'm asking this question, I had a very sincere young believer ask me, is it wrong for my wife and I to take out a mortgage to buy a house? So after going through our money management course this summer and then hearing about we want to get out of debt, we want to be debt free, they literally took that and applied it to their personal life and said, is it wrong for us to take out a mortgage? Because I don't know that we could save enough money
Right.
to beat inflation. You know, you pay a mortgage off over 15 or 30 years. And it was a very good, legitimate question. And there may be people listening to this saying, yeah, I'm against debt. But we've all been there. I mean, I've had a home mortgage. You've had a home mortgage. There's been things in our life that we've had to borrow. So is the Bible against all borrowing? How would we explain that?
Well, I would say those two verses, neither of those verses say debt is sin. They say when you borrow, you are now under an obligation that is going to weigh on you. So count the cost before you borrow tons of money. It just says that you're going to be enslaved to the bank. Like the bank will, there's parameters that will happen on your life where if you don't take out a loan, that won't be on your life. That doesn't say it's sinful. It just says that's what's going to happen to you. You're going to be under this kind of weight. And the second one says, well, if you don't pay it off. So if you have the idea like, oh, I'm just going to borrow all this money and then we won't pay it. Well, that is sinful. That attitude is, you're not being responsible. You're not loving your neighbor as yourself if you're just going to take this money and run kind of thing. But if you're counting the costs and you're saying, no, we're going to pay this back quickly and as responsibly as we can, well, that's in line with both of those verses.
It's a matter of principle and wisdom, not a matter of law.
Yeah. So I
like
mean,
you shall not take out debt.
Yeah, it
but
doesn't
if
say
you
that,
do take out debt, wisdom says you repay that, and you're obligated
That's
to
right.
pay that back.
You're obligated.
So
to.
one of the ways we could apply that second one, the wicked borrows and does not repay, you don't need to borrow more than you can repay.
Right.
That's right.
So let's take a house or a
Responsible.
car. You have a choice between a Corvette that's like $100,000. I'm making numbers up. And then you have the choice of an El Camino that's $5,000. And so here's your choices, and you only make $10,000 a year. So is it wrong or right for you to even evaluate, should I get the Corvette? I've always wanted a Corvette. Is it God's will that I get the Corvette? Well, I think I could clearly tell that fictitious person, no, it's not God's will.
Yeah.
Because A, you cannot borrow what you cannot pay back.
Yeah.
That is the biblical principle.
There's no wisdom in that.
There's no wisdom in
It's
that.
foolishness.
Yeah, and the same would go for a house. You're looking at houses. Well, this one's $500,000 and that one's $300,000. Well, you have to look at your income and you have to say, realistically, what position are we going to be in if we borrow the 5 versus the 3?
Yeah.
And I think every believer has to look at that and then say, okay, what is my obligation biblically to debt? Now, of course, the best position would be you don't ever have to be in debt.
Sure.
Because as Dave Ramsey says, the greatest means to wealth is your own income and not having to spend your income on all these other things. But you also have to have a bed and a
Yeah.
house and, those sorts of things. Now, some people, they live in mini homes or they live in an RV. And they say, we're going to be as minimal as we possibly can be. And that's great for them. Other people, we're going to build a barn dominium and pay as we go. Great. Not everybody can do that.
Right.
I can't build a barn dominium.
Well, you can't in our county. You actually can.
It's
law.
like against the law. They're like, barn dominiums
We
are
looked
now
into it. Yeah,
a trend.
it's a law. You can't do that here.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
So sorry.
Sorry to the barn dominium. But yeah, there's so many other things that we allow.
But no, you're right. We have a limited amount of resources, and we have to determine what is the best use for all of those resources that God has given us. And if we realize that He's given those things first, then usually it's a little bit easier to see, okay, what is wise? Like I have this limited box of funding or resources, whatever. how do I allocate those in the most wise way and effective way?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's different for everybody. Everybody's situation is different. If I inherited 20 acres of land in the country and I'm not in the county, okay, maybe I can build a barn dominium, and that's the best plan for me, and we're going to start small, and we're going to save up, and we're going to own our house outright when we build it. But if I don't get that land given to me, or I don't have that opportunity, then I've got to go any other route that I can to live. So, you know, and here's, you know, we all know this. You can't keep up with inflation. So inflation is always rising. And we've seen this most recently in the pandemic and everything after it. I mean, what used to cost you $1 costs you $2. So if you saved $1 million and it took you 10 years to save $1 million, when you saved it, whatever you were going to buy 10 years ago for $1 million is now theoretically $2 million.
Right.
So you're really right back where you started. So the benefit of taking out a mortgage or a loan on something that's needed is that, yes, you do have to pay interest, but you get to have that without inflation just eating at your savings, because you can't keep up with that pace of inflation.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I've been saving for 30 years for a 50-cent Coke, and now it's $1.25.
Wow.
So I guess I'm not going to get the Coke.
Is that your retirement plan?
That was my retirement plan. Just going to drink a Coca-Cola and call it a day. And, I mean, when I started, it was, listen, when I was a kid, Cokes were, and some people are like, well, when I was a kid, they were a penny. But when I was, they were what was the British coinage? They were a Hence pence or whatever. Yeah. When I was a kid, well, okay, granted, you got me beat. But when I was a kid, I remember they were 35 cents for a Coke out of a vending machine at Kroger on State Line Road, 35 cents. And then I remember when it went up to 50, and we were like, wow, oh, that's getting tight. And then 75 cents, and then $1. And I was like, when are they going to stop? And now it's like, what, $2.25?
Something
like that. You got to take. There's a scene in Arnold Schwarzenegger's movie, 1988 movie, The Running Man. And many of our people have probably never seen this movie, but I used to like it, where this woman goes to a vending machine, and she has to take out, it's set in the future, and she has to take out like a bag of quarters, like $6 of quarters, putting it in a Coke machine. And that's humorous, but true today. So anyway, there you go. All right. So see, they were prophets. Whoever did The Running Man, they were a prophet. So all debt is not necessarily bad. It's just you have to be able to look at your situation, think in love, think in the law of the Spirit.
Assess your needs.
Assess your needs and say, okay, can I pay this back? Is this reasonable, or is this, frivolous?
Yeah.
I mean, do I really need the $100,000 car? Can I get by with the lesser car? What is best for our family, or for me, or for our future, or whatever? Because the reality is, no matter, here's the other thing too about money, and you hear this from really wealthy people. Either they're lying to us to make us all feel better at the bottom, or they're telling us the truth. It's one or the other. But they will admit everybody has limits.
Yeah.
It's not indefinite. Nothing is indefinite. You can't just, even the millionaire has spending limits. So, again, the 1983 movie Brewster's Million with Richard Pryor, he's given $3 million, and if he can spend $3 million in 30 days, he gets $30 million. Now, this movie was set in the early 80s, and so spending $3 million was a hard thing for the character in Brewster's Millions. I mean, he had to really be creative to spend $3 million. The funny thing is, today, I mean, you could spend $3 million
in a second
at the grocery store. So it's like today, if he came to the future, he'd be like, I'm taking everybody to Kroger.
Yeah.
And,
10 cartons of eggs.
10 cartons of eggs, and that was $3 million. Brewster's Millions. So these were the movies that shaped me. Can you tell when I was young? Running Man, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Brewster's Millions, Richard Pryor. And I'm not saying they're good. I'm not endorsing. I don't remember. I was a kid, so I don't remember, but I do remember their themes. And so, back then $3 million was a big amount of money, but now it's a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, you could easily spend that. You could spend $30 million easily in one day if you wanted to. So that just shows how you have to view.
There are always
money.
limits.
There's always limits. Yeah, there's always limits, and no one has indefinite, endless supplies always.
Which is why it's important to also personally, to finish, I guess, this section, it's always important, am I going to debt? Like, if I go into debt now for whatever this particular thing is that going to hurt me in the future? Like our savings goals, our retirement, like, is that going to mess us up in the future? Always thinking long term, maybe even denying some comforts in the present, like right now in the short term, to avoid hindering the long term plan. So always thinking, and even having the goal in mind, which I think is great. It's our goal, mine and my wife's, to be debt free, fully in the future. I mean, that would be incredible.
Well, and full disclosure, I mean, I've said this to the church. This is how Amanda and I try to live our life to the best of our ability.
Yeah.
Now, having teenagers, sometimes that's hard, but to the best of our ability, we have not personally overextended ourselves with credit cards. We have not personally overextended ourselves like the cars we drive. They are paid for. But they're not going to be brand new, but they're paid for, So we do the best we can with that. When I was in college, I was at a Christian college in Arkansas, and we had a dean who cared about our finances, and he called a guy who was similar to a Dave Ramsey, but this guy was a no-name, guy who was an accountant who had this ministry, and he would come around to colleges and talk to students. And he came to our chapel, and then he stayed for 2 days, and he met with all the students by appointment. And he taught me as a 19-year-old to do the envelope system.
Yeah.
And this was back, this was 1994. So this was back before the Dave Ramsey thing and all that. And, talked about don't take a credit card and ever pay on it. The interest, pay it off in 30 days. And he kind of gave us all these tricks. They're not tricks. I mean, just sensible. Practical.
Just common sense.
Put a budget together. And that really affected me. And I'm so thankful that the dean brought that guy in and said, we're going to make this a chapel service, and we're going to do this for 2 days. Yeah. And we want you college students not to be financially in debt. And that kind of patterned the rest of my life. And I'll say this spiritually. We've not always had a lot of money as a family. I mean, when you taught at a Christian school, you didn't make a lot of money. And in ministry, typically you don't make the top tier financially. But the Lord has always blessed in amazing ways. And my wife made the comment, she said, even when we didn't get raises, the Lord found ways to give us a raise. So maybe he laid on somebody's heart to, build our house and not charge us as the general contractor and save us, tons of money. Or maybe he, blessed us in some other way where somebody was just gracious to pay a kid's camp, and it was God's raise,
right.
So here's the thing: the Lord will take care of you if you're committed to that. Now, don't do foolish things,
right?
But the Lord will take care of you, and He will provide. And the good news is, you will see the faithfulness of God in your life if you're committed to that. Mm-hmm. I think.
Yeah, I agree. And that song, the words you just said, God will take care of you. That's that song, the hymn. God will take care of you. I remember hearing this.
Could you sing that?
No, I can't.
I'm not familiar.
No, but I heard Miss Von Seal Allison sing that several years before she passed. Yeah, God will take care of you.
And He will. And that is very true. And that's very, very encouraging. So we want to encourage all of you out there. Try to live your life debt-free, trusting the Lord, and the Lord will take care of you financially in ways that you can't understand, but the faith that you have and employ, the God will be faithful. Yeah. And that's always encouraging. And one other thing I did want to say, because maybe there's somebody out there going, oh no, there's people out there that have unlimited resources. Well, no, that's the point. Money, paper money, may be unlimited because government prints it, but the resources it buys are limited. We have only so much water, only so much oil, only so much crop. So no matter how you look at money, money is a means of production and a means of buying and selling, and your resources are limited on the planet.
Yeah.
So money is limited. Not everybody has all of it, right?
This is all temporal, right?
It's all temporary. Okay. So that ends our first question. Is all debt wrong? And I think we answered it biblically. And with that, we have Timothy's second sound effect that he's going to bring today. Timothy, go ahead. Good job, Timothy. Thank you, Timothy. You did a great job. You can guess what that sound effect was. And if you write in and guess, you get to pay off the debt. We hope you'll join into that little crusade. All right, let's go to our next question. Is debt wrong for the church? Why are you guys putting your hands in? Do you not like Timothy's sound effects? I'm trying to encourage him because he does a great job with these podcasts. I'm trying to encourage you, Timothy. Now, Timothy, I'm not going to tell the audience that I did the first two sound effects because I'm trying to make you look good, but I need you to come up with a third because I don't have one for the third point. All right. So, is debt wrong for the church? That's a good question. So, Broadway is in debt currently as of this recording. Now, was it wrong for the church to build a building and go in debt? We would probably say some of the same principles would apply.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, if the church, think about the church not as a building. So, like, take the building aside for a second. If the church is a congregation, a local group of people who are like-minded in their belief and trust and faith in Jesus Christ, right, alone. And so you have this church who is made up of people. They are also made up of individuals. And so the same principles biblically would apply individually as well as corporately. So the church would have to decide, those same things, like, are we being frivolous with the money that we invest or give or go into debt for, or the things that we're doing, are those needs versus wants? Our resources as a church, a group of people, are also limited. So, I mean, all of those things, like you said, just apply because a church is a group of individual people who are also trying to obey and be wise in their stewardship of what God has given.
Yeah. What do you think, Brady?
Yeah, no, I mean, that agree. If they, need a building, to me, obviously churches can meet in different places, but it is nice for a church to have a home base for ministry and to have rooms for Sunday school classes. I mean, sure, there's, house churches in North Korea, but I'm sure most churches would say it'd be nice to have a building to meet in as a group of people that you can have ministry out of. So, yeah, I don't think necessarily it was wrong. I guess the question comes in for how long, or if are we actively paying it off, or are we just letting it simmer and soak for years and then letting the interest rack up that we didn't necessarily have to have paid if we pay it off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So people have made this comment to me. Well, when we get out of debt, I just know we're going to go back into debt again. Y'all are going to come up and say, well, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. Well, that's not like the initial idea or plan. We don't have anything on the horizon with that. But is there a possibility that we would ever go back into debt again? Possibly.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not saying no. We will never, ever. Now, hopefully, you get to a place where you're saving to do what has to be done.
Yeah.
So, like right now, we've been in a position where if a chiller broke, then you've got to come up with $50,000 or whatever it is, $200 million, $250,000, Brewster's Millions, and you got to come up with that money out of your savings. You haven't saved that much money. You saved maybe $150,000, for the inevitable. And I'm making numbers up.
Yeah,
I'm just kind of fictitious numbers. But when you're debt free, all that money isn't going towards a mortgage, so you're able to save for those rainy days that are going to come. And you got, here's the other thing. Nobody ever thinks about this, but when you build a building, you have to keep it up.
Yeah.
And so 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, somebody is going to have to keep that up. So it's not just building a building. It's, okay, how are we going to maintain what we have so that it doesn't, all of that investment is not a waste.
Right. Well, think about your own home. Like, again, kind of pulling the individual part into it, the church, but like think about your own home. I mean, the average mortgage is probably somewhere around $1,500 to $1,800 a month now in this climate, maybe even more than that. But think if you were completely debt free and you owned your home outright, and obviously you still have to pay a little bit on insurances and taxes, but like even if you had $1,200 left of that every month that was just opened up for you, I mean, think of the potential of saving and putting back into maintaining your home. Because your home over 30 years, if you have a 30-year mortgage, your home is aging for 30 years. And so you've got to come up with money, like you're saying, to fix it and to pour into it when everything breaks or gutters leak or the AC unit goes out, which it will. I mean, all of those things happen and we have to be ready. And so for us, think about like if we were out of debt and we weren't paying a mortgage, I mean, that's huge investment and saving potential that is currently locked away.
Well, and people say, well, right now, I mean, you can't borrow that money any cheaper, so it doesn't make any sense to pay it off. And I'm thinking, well, it does, because you have to have all this extra money to keep the building up.
Right.
And there's things we want to do with the building to keep it up. Just basic things like
Chillers.
Maybe paint the wall for the first time.
Yeah,
that never got done.
Paint the walls.
I mean, maybe that doesn't look great. And so maybe actually we want to paint over the primer. And, we've been waiting for 30 years to do that. Or maybe, we want to replace the sin-stained carpet, right? Dripping in red, right? We could sing that on Sunday, written in red, and we're talking about our carpet. You look
it's
at
green carpet though, but
it's got like red
it's like gout
stains
or something. I don't know.
And so you see all that, and it's not a must, but it sure would be nice, to have air conditioning and to have our lights working at 100% when the board goes out.
Well, think about when people come into your home, again, using your home analogy. If people come into your home and the lights aren't working or they're broken or your carpet is dilapidated, shag and all of that, I mean, when they walk in, what do they think? I mean, it doesn't matter what you do as a homeowner, but what do those people think? They may not care about their home, and it's, that's something.
Or they're not able.
Or they're not able to care for
things
their home.
are so bad, bless their hearts, they're just not able to keep up. And, think about that image too that's communicated as a church. I mean, you don't want to look like you're falling apart when people walk in the door for the first time. So, there's a lot of that where you go, you've got it. The church can't, in the same principle that we're saying you can't overextend yourself, the church can't.
Right.
Case in point, our faux foyer today is the legend. I mean,
it's so sad.
We have a massive, gigantic foyer that goes nowhere and does nothing.
It's the front doors of the church. I see a day when they are glass doors and people are holding hands walking into the front door so that you could see it from see people actually coming into the church from the road, not like sneaking into the sides and the back.
And piped in through the speakers of that foyer will be Von Seal, Allison singing, "We will take care of you."
Not exactly.
I love it.
So I'd say
I foresee it, and it is done.
Looking back, things to learn from, but I would say going forward. These are definitely things to consider, as we make future decisions. Like, should we go into debt? I mean, I think the answer is no. It's not inherently wrong for a church to go into debt, but we can, with prudence, think wisely about those decisions and how they're going to affect generations to come, and really the ministry that we're doing right now. Will this inhibit? Will this hinder? I mean, talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars a year going to a mortgage, I mean, that definitely inhibits things that could happen, ministry potential, and the potential for future generations to do ministry in this church.
And on that note, let's move to our third question, which is, what would debt-free accomplish? And before we do that, Timothy has a sound for us. Once again, Timothy, let's hear it. Good job, Timothy. Great job. Glad you thought of that. If you can figure out what that is, write in to Timothy, and you may get to pay the debt off. All right. So, third question, what can debt-free accomplish? I mean, why would it be important to get it done this year? And that's my prayer. And by the way, this year is 2016. No, I'm just kidding. But we want to get it done this year. And why would we want to get it done sooner rather than later? What benefit would it entail? Let me say this, and you mentioned this about the church, and I'm going to step out on a limb, and I'm sure people aren't going to like it, and Brandon's getting nervous. Broadway's way behind. Way behind. Like, you look at our sister churches around us and what they're doing, whether it's church planting, right? So like Longview Point, they're planting like 35 million churches in 2 days, or whether it's, I
think it's 30 churches in 10 years.
Something like that. I can't confirm or deny. I don't know.
Years or days.
Yeah, and then you look down the road over here, like Jonathan's church, where they just have great like internship programs, and they have a campus in Hernando, and they're thinking about the future. You look at Colonial 1, and they have the president on board, and they're fighting the Cylons. That's another movie, Battlestar Galactica. But anyway, you have Colonial 1, and they're doing all their stuff, and they're multi-campus and growing, and you look at, okay, we were here first, and yet, to use the word in a good way, kind of retarded growth that has happened. And some of that, not all of that, is due to excessive debt that has hindered forward progress. So, yes, there are things that need to be done, and I tell you guys all the time, we've got to catch up to where we probably should have already been. Mm-hmm. Catch up to the community. We've got to catch up to growth. We've got to catch up to a lot of things. And part of the reason we haven't caught up over the years, again, not the only reason, not the only variable, but part is the debt. I mean, when you have $356,000 in your annual budget that goes to a bank every year, what could you do with $356,000 in your regular budget that could do ministry,
right,
that could do missions?
Yeah.
People are like, well, we'd like to split the junior high and the senior high. Well, that takes money. And right now, the money goes to the bank. And they say, well, we'd like, a dynamic youth room or something, church down the street, they have a rock wall and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not debating whether that's right or wrong. But the answer is that takes money. And the money is not going to the youth room, it's going to the debt. And you could just go down the line, right? You could go on and on, whatever it is. We need interns. We need church planters. We need
pastors.
Yeah. More pastors as the church grows. Why do we not have that? Well, because you only have limited resources, and your resources, we are doing the best we can on a shoestring budget, right? I mean, that's just the truth. We're doing the best we can on a shoestring budget. And so, why are we motivated to pay this off? Because the future depends on it.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's absolutely valid. And I'll piggyback on you and say that obviously we're not looking to compete with other churches.
No, not at all.
I'm the spirit of competition. Yeah. But, they are ministering. I mean, they are planning churches and all of those things that really every church should be doing. We should be a church that is consciously not only, ministering and serving our local congregation in the best way we can, which again takes people and resources and time and money, all of those things that we're trying to manage and steward wisely and well in the sight of God. But also, we do want to go outside the walls and, reaching out into our community, planting new churches, because that's what the church did in the New Testament in Acts. They went around and they just continue to plant churches in all of these new communities that were breaking out, and the Lord was blessing that because they were so faithful to do those things. And our faithfulness right now is really hinged to this weight of the debt that we have over us. And again, like the proverb says, the borrower is slave to the lender. So right now we're dependent on what the bank tells us we can do, you know? So that's, it would be nothing. Well, I mean, that would probably make me happier, but you know, it would be very exciting, for me to see the debt go away.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, me as well. I mean, I think we'd all agree.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, I'm reiterating.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because there are so many things that we could do.
And when we're out of debt, Lord willing, that day ever comes, people say, well, then what are you going to do? Oh my goodness, the list is a mile long. And I want to be careful, because I can't just say things without getting in trouble, right? So first of all, people with vision scare people. You know, and so the visionary has to be able to look down the road. Most people don't look down the road. They look right in front of their face. So you have to be able to look down the road, and then you have to think, you know, how is any decision we make going to affect people who are on our property?
Yeah.
So you have to think about that, and you have to be very, very careful. So people are like, well, what are you going to do? Well, I could give you a list a mile long, but we're not ready as a church to necessarily hear that. What we're trying to gently say is, help us get there.
Yeah.
Help us get to this journey where we're not in debt. And again, will we ever go in debt again? We don't know the answer to that. Maybe we might need Brandon's dream is a 3-story educational wing with a bridge.
No.
That is, they always say that.
Now, no, I do have this weird vision in my head. It's a God-given vision.
Oh boy.
Maybe it is. Who knows? Of this building in our little courtyard on the north side. It's in the middle of the parking lot. There's this like grassy knoll that's literally, we could have parking there and people could actually park and walk into the building.
Closer to the building. But they
no,
made
there's
like
a grassy knoll.
Huge, and it's huge.
It's massive. It's big enough for a building. And so anyway, I just have a vision of like, we do like a maybe 2-story. I didn't say 3-story, but like an educational building there, where we could provide area space, which is sorely needed on our campus for classes to meet, adults, children. We need spaces for people to meet, and then having like where the portico is now, like where cars come in and drop people off, literally on top of that, build like a sky bridge to unite the two buildings. I just
the William B. Hughes Memorial Sky Bridge.
I would love that. I mean, literally, it would be.
You didn't live to see it, William.
It would be like 50 feet long, but I would. I would probably move my office up there.
It'd be like 2 feet. 2 feet. The William B. Hughes Memorial Bridge.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. I have that vision. I'm feeling it. And then convert the rest of the grass on the north side to parking lot.
Yeah.
Why not?
Why not?
There you go.
Parking in the middle, people walking in the front glass doors where a receptionist is sitting there in the faux front greeting new guests. And
well, and a little more real. That's not realistic, but a little more realistic. You know, for me, the big thing right now, and I say this to you guys often, is we need safe spaces for our youth and our grade school children, and we don't have that. Now, we're able to go over into the school and use classrooms, and that's very nice that we can do that we have that. But it's still not on par with, again, we're not competing, but, you know, you look around you and you say, okay, you know, the other again, we're very stunted. You know, the other churches have, you know, nice, safe spaces for their kids or their youth or whatever. And, you know, I noticed because that was a big thing at my former church. We made sure we had a safe, clean space for the grade school kids. And when you do that, parents are more likely to want to come, and their kids are, you know, and not that that's the motivation, but, you know, it's like anything else. Do you want to go to a restaurant that's dirty and is a hole in the wall, or do you want to go somewhere where the tablecloths are washed and it looks attractive, right? So, you know, you kind of, there's some logic to this. There's some spirituality where we're coming for
again,
God
it shows
alone.
that we care for their children.
Right, and that we've thought.
Yeah,
and
we've
so,
thought,
like right now, we have no area for 1st through 6th grade. And for the longest time, they were just in a room and that was the best we had, just a room. But there was no security. There was no check your kid in and they're up there and they're safe. It was just like you get stuck in this room. And you can go out 7 different ways if you're a kid in that room, and sometimes they would. And parents would say, "My kid was running around the blah 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 blah," during Sunday school. Well, they went to the bathroom and they didn't come back, But there's all these things, and so yes, there's things we need to do in our facility, not building anything new, but in our facility, where we could say we're going to take space and we're going to rededicate it. But it takes money to do that. And again, people look for those things. They look and case in point, when they redid the preschool wing, that was dynamic. And doing that, where have we seen the most growth in the church in the last 2 years? It's been parents of that age group because it's organized, it's clean, it's well done, it's secure. Now, again, that's not the only reason they're coming. Worship has a lot to do with it. Preaching has a lot to do with it. But it's kind of like everything else, right? You got to get them to that point where they can hear what you're saying. We have to all be together. And so you take what's done in the preschool wing and you go, okay, if we had done that in every area, updated, kept clean, think about where we would be. So there's so many things like that just honestly are on the list that have to be done.
Yeah.
And we have ideas to do it so that you're not building a new building.
Yes.
But again, we always want to be careful with those ideas because different people have different thoughts, and people say, that's the memorial bathroom. You can't take down the memorial bathroom.
I don't think we have a memorial bathroom.
I'm just saying, I'm sure there's one in the foyer.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of our people, and we got to give credit, thankfully. In fact, we have their names, and we're going to read all their names
and give their email
as
addresses.
a memorial. Thank you for giving to the Debt Reduction Fund. Thank you, Joan Smith. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. There's probably a Joan Smith like, I didn't give to that. Okay, maybe not. But the
Lord knows.
The Lord knows. Jesus knows, and let him reward you, right? If you do it in public, he ain't going to reward you. So here's the thing. A lot of our members have graciously given, and we are so thankful for that.
Absolutely.
They've bought into the vision. They've done it. They're stepping up to the plate, and we're thankful. My prayer is that we all sacrifice a little bit more, and we get this beast over. Imagine the psychological impact and the spiritual impact that's going to have on our church. Some of these people have said, I thought we'd never pay that off.
Yeah.
One brother told me, he said, it just seemed like every year they'd tell us, and it seemed like it had gone up, that we never could get rid of it.
Well, it did that one year because of the balloon payment. But
it's like, well, you owe $2 million, and then when you pay that off, you have another $1 million note
to pay off
that balloons, which means
just
it'll probably
interest.
be more like $1.9 million, which means you're never getting out of debt.
Praise the Lord,
So,
that's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
No, and just to piggyback, I would say, and also just continually think about the future generations to come who will become members of Broadway in the future. How are we setting them up for success in spiritually, personally, but also in ministry?
Yeah, absolutely. And truthfully, I mean, I almost said no to coming here because of the debt. It scared me as a pastor because I knew it's my responsibility. I'm going to have to lead, and that's a lot of money. And people out there listening going, well, if we'd known that, we would have told you it was $6 million. Keep you from coming. Is that all it took? Yes, that's all it took. So the only reason I said okay is because they said, but we're working on a plan to try to get rid of it. But, I mean, it scared the hooey out of me. The hooey, Brady. Do y'all say that in Kansas City?
No.
The hooey? Okay. All right.
Well, this week is sponsored by
Dave Ramsey.
Timothy's sound effect.
Hollywood.
Hollywood.
All
and
the movies.
the movies from the 80s.
From the 80s.
And Dave Ramsey.
Dave Ramsey.
Yes.
He would not agree with half the things in this podcast, but yes.
He'd be like, y'all are all stupid.
That'll be $30.
Yeah, $30. Well, Dave, if you would like to just give us 1% of what you make off of everybody, we could pay the debt off. So somebody write Dave and say, give us just 1%, and it'll change our life. And maybe he will. He prayed about joining our church. No, I'm just kidding. He's praying about that. All right, well, on that note, we better quit before we really get in trouble and before Timothy comes up with a fourth sound effect. All right, so on that note, we're out.